let's give an introduction to Blender. First, we'll open it. For the sake of this training, we're using version 2.7. So if you don't see the same options I do, it's probably certain that you're using a different version. Let's take a tour of the user interface, because Blender is a bit complicated because there are a lot of options. First, you'll see your typical menus, File for opening, saving, and your preferences. You can even import and export different 3D models. The render menu, we're not going to get into that for 3D printing because that's not within the scope of this tutorial. The window menu, you can toggle full screen, you can make separate windows. If you have multi-monitors, you can choose those options here. For this training, we're going to toggle full screen so we can see everything right in the window. Now, the first thing you normally see is the 3D viewer. This is where most of the action happens. Blender by default gives you a default cube to start out with, a camera, and a lamp. Now, we're not going to need a camera or a lamp because we're not doing any kind of photo rendering or any cinematography. So we'll get rid of those a little bit later when we start. On the right, we have our objects. These are where all of our different objects are located. You'll see we have our default cube, the camera, and the lamp. Blender is very key oriented, meaning there are a lot of key presses to do very basic functions. For example, if I want to delete an object, I simply select it by right-clicking on that object and hitting X. It will ask me for confirmation, and I click yes that I want to delete it. I'm going to do the same for the camera and the lamp, but if you do not want to do those one by one, you can hit A to select all, and then hit X to delete and click to confirm. Now, the next thing we have is two menus that we will be using the most. The first is a tool menu on the left, and you can hide and show that by hitting the T key. Hitting the T key will show the side menu over here. And then you have the properties menu on the right, and you show that by hitting the N key. And here you can change parameters of your objects and your items. Now that we have a basic understanding where things are, let's start a new project. I'm going to go up to File and click New. It's going to ask me if I want to reload up the startup file. That's fine. The startup file is a list of preferences that you can use to customize Blender every time you open it. For example, if you did not want to see the same default cube, lamp, and camera, you can simply select all of them, delete them, and then if you go into File, you click Save Startup File. That way, the next time you open Blender, you'll see exactly what you see right now, without any objects on the screen. So let's start a new one. We're going to reload the startup file, which exactly is the same thing we did. Now, let's add a simple object. Adding a simple object, you hit Shift A for adding. Hitting Shift A brings up a context menu, and it gives you a list of things that you can add. For the sake of our training, we're going to be adding meshes. Now there's different options for adding meshes. These are your basic geometric shapes: cubes, circles, spheres, cylinders, and so on. For this training, let's start with a cylinder. And it adds a cylinder right in the center where your 3D cursor is. Now, I'm using my middle mouse button to click and drag so I can look at these objects in different angles. If you need precise viewing angles, you use your number pad, and you can do things like hitting the number 1 on your number pad. That snaps you to a front view. You hit 3 on your number pad. That snaps you to a side view. And then you can hit 7, which gives you a top-down view. Now, by holding the Control key and hitting those same keys, you can look at the exact opposite of that view. Now, let me give you an example of that. You can't really see it with the cylinder here, so let me load a really good example. I'm going to delete the cylinder. I'm going to load a project that I had saved, which is this chest knight. Now, if I wanted to look at it from the front, I hit the number 1 on the number pad. If I want to look at the side, I hit the 3 on the number pad. If I want to look at the top down, I'll hit 7. What if I want to look at the bottom side of it? Well, like I said, if you hold down your Control key, you can do the exact opposite. So instead of 7 being the top down view, it can be the bottom up view. That goes the same for the other keys. If I want a side view, I hit the 3 key. If I want to see it from the other side, I hold Control and hit the 3 key. And same with the front and back. So that's how to view your object from different angles. Now, let's say you're working on your object and you're zoomed in and you're working on very fine detail and you want to zoom out and center your object in your viewer. Simply hitting Shift-C will do that. So no matter where I am, if I'm zoomed in, if I'm looking at a fine piece of detail here and I want to see the overall picture, hitting Shift-C will zoom me out. Now, there's another viewing mode that you need to be made aware of, and that's perspective versus orthogonal. Let me give you an example of what I'm speaking of. Let's get rid of the night. I'm going to add a cube. Now, typically in the real world, if you look at a cube, obviously the edge that's closer to you appears larger, and the edge that's away from you appears smaller. This is called the perspective view. What that means is this is as if you are holding this object in your hand and looking at it in the real world. Now, if you need to make sure that things line up, you need to choose the orthographic view. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to look at the box from the front. Now, obviously I can only see the front because the rest of it is behind my view. So I'm going to hit the Z key, and that gives me a wireframe view. And if I rotate my camera, you can see that it's now a wireframe model of your object. Now, if we look at it straight on, you can see that the back edge of the box appears smaller than the front edge. In orthographic view, everything lines up perfectly, meaning the back side and the front side appear to be exactly the same size. Now, this is very handy for making objects where things need to line up very precisely. Now, to save our project, which I recommend doing often, you go File, Save As if it's a new project. Give it a name. We'll call this training.blend and hit Enter. Now, as you're working with your project, if you just need to quickly save, you hit Control-S and it will ask you if you want to overwrite your project file, and we do, and then we're good.